What's up guys, Tommy Bowie here from Movie Rewind. Welcome to Top 10 Scenes. It's a new film series I intend to do on this channel where I'll be watching a film which I've loved for the majority of my life and picking out my top 10 favourite scenes from that film. And what better film to start with than the original 2002 Spider-Man film, directed by Sam Raimi and starring Tobey Maguire. Now, a couple of things before we start. Firstly, if I sound a bit under the weather, that is because I have COVID. So if I start coughing, then I really do apologise, but I can't really help it at this stage. Secondly, this video is pure biased. Obviously, these scenes are ones that I personally really like. That doesn't mean that they're the universal answer. And thirdly, if you think there are scenes missing from this list which you think should have been on it, please feel free to comment down below. And without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the first scene, I'm going through these in chronological order, is Peter and MJ backyard talk. Now, this is a really good scene because it feels natural. I've heard people say that the dialogue's very awkward, that there is quite silent moments, and there seems to be moments when they don't really know what they're supposed to say to one another. But that's just realistic. They're two young people, you know, this is what happens, especially... I was a geek myself, like Peter Parker. I completely understand how it's difficult to speak to people in new situations, even if you've known these people for a long time. I also think this is a really important scene because this is the first time MJ notices Peter for the person that he is. I think there's a great moment when MJ goes to tell Peter her dreams and then hesitates. And she hesitates because her dreams have never really been taken seriously. If she spoke to her boyfriend Flash about it, or even her dad, they would probably both laugh in her face. So she was hesitant at first, but you can see her face light up when Peter says, well, that's perfect, you know, you'd be really great, you're going to light up Broadway. And I think that's just a really touching moment. It's the first moment that MJ kind of sees Peter in a new light, but it's also a moment in which Peter gets to know that MJ isn't this perfect girl who has everything. She actually has dreams and aspirations, and she's just trying to achieve them. So yeah, this is a really good scene. It develops the characters really well, and it also feels realistic as well because it is quite awkward. With great power comes great responsibility. It had to be on this list. Tobey Maguire and Cliff Robertson, these two actors, they knocked it out of the park with this scene. I can't think of how they could have improved it, really. There is not a lot of shouting, you know, they're not having a go at one another. This is just Uncle Ben trying to give Peter some advice, and he just flies off the handle. He just says, look, stop pretending to be my father. And you can really feel it when he says that. From Uncle Ben's somber reaction to even seeing in Peter's eyes that he knows he shouldn't have said that, but he's just like, well, I've got stuff to do, I'll make it up to him later. And the actual with great power comes great responsibility line, I think is handled really well. Because obviously Uncle Ben doesn't know that Peter now has superpowers. He's just trying to offer him some advice, which I think any man or woman, or actually anyone, could use in their life. That you don't just get something for nothing. You know, whenever you have something, responsibility comes with that. So yeah, a really good scene. Uncle Ben's death. It's an emotional watch. It is hard. I tear up to this very day, and I have no shame in admitting that. Tobey Maguire's acting is phenomenal during this scene. I know people criticise his crying. His crying kind of became a meme, but I think it's very realistic. I do really like that Uncle Ben is actually happy to see Peter there, because obviously he's cold and alone. And he's just glad that someone he loves and cares about, someone who he raised as a son, is there to support him near the end. So I think that's a really emotional scene. And it also leads into a very intense car chase. You can feel the hatred Peter has when he is running to get this carjacker. And it is a very good action scene. It's very intense to watch. I love the swinging. The first time he swings successfully, it's just... feels different. The way they film it, having the camera kind of follow Spider-Man, it just feels like you're swinging throughout New York City as well. So they did a really good job, and obviously the realization that the carjacker was actually someone that Peter could have stopped. I think that's just the icing on the cake. It kind of gives a roller coaster worth of emotions, which finally makes Peter understand what with great power comes great responsibility actually means. The rooftop talk scene. Now, this scene, obviously Spider-Man and Green Goblin had fought a couple of times before this scene, but I think this is the scene which really highlights the ideologies between both of them. It shows and contrasts them in the sense that Spider-Man obviously goes by the philosophy of with great power comes great responsibility. He might have the power, but he shouldn't be irresponsible with it. He needs to use it for good. Whereas Green Goblin goes by the philosophy, because of obviously all the backstabbings Norman Osborn has had in his career, that at the end of the day, people don't care, and the only person you really need to look out for is yourself. And I think more modern day comic book films need scenes like this, which really highlight the differences between the hero and villain and how they actually work, because obviously these two aren't just fighting for no reason. It's because they disagree, their ideals clash with one another, and they come head to head. And I also think it's a touching note, the Green Goblin, he's not trying to kill Spider-Man. Like, he could have easily killed him here, but he doesn't. He leaves him because he wants Spider-Man to just see how he sees the world. At the end of the day, no matter what you do, eventually people will hate you. And there's also some great dialogue in this scene as well. I think Willem Dafoe kills it. I think actually when you can see his eyes, it adds a lot more to his performance. So I've always loved this scene. I think it just highlights what Spider-Man and Green Goblin believe in and why they clash on so many occasions. Spider-Man and MJ kiss. Yep, obviously Kirsten Dunst nearly got caught hypothermia. Tobey Maguire couldn't breathe, but it was an iconic scene. And people say that this film doesn't have dark moments. Well, MJ nearly got gang raped. So, yeah, this film does have dark moments. I like the fact that Peter doesn't hold his punches back when attacking this gang, because obviously they're threatening MJ. And of course, the first kiss, it is amazing. Just everything about it, the way they do it, it is just really well done. And obviously, it's still memorable, even 20 years later. So yeah, it's an iconic scene. It had to be on the list. The Thanksgiving scene. Now, I remember actually Chris Stuckman, kind of a famous movie reviewer on YouTube, pointed out in this scene that Norman Osborn is wearing red and blue, which are Spider-Man's colours. Peter Parker is wearing green, which is the Green Goblin's colours. And I think that's actually a clever touch. It just shows how much effort Raimi put into making this film, all the small details. But this Thanksgiving scene really highlights how Norman Osborn's mental health is deteriorating. I mean, he's going fully insane. There are a couple of moments during this scene, especially when he comes into contact with MJ and his altercation with Aunt May over him eating stuff before they've said grace, are really, really good, because it just highlights that Norman Osborn is slowly losing his grip on reality. I also think this scene highlights that MJ and Harry's relationship just could never work. Harry, I don't think, actually loves MJ. He thinks that MJ will impress his father. At the end of the day, Harry seems to think that, oh, look, if he sees I'm with a girl like MJ, that means that I finally have his respect. So I think that this scene is really good. I think it sorts out a lot of the issues throughout this film. They all come to a head. And also, obviously, the reveal that Norman now knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man is great. I think how they did it with him seeing a cut which the Green Goblin gave Spider-Man in an earlier scene is handled really well. And also the fact that Norman Osborn doesn't kill him there and then. He's actually shocked because he likes Peter. Peter, for him, is the son he never had. So I really do think that this scene is an important and crucial one in the film, because it highlights that Norman Osborn, he doesn't want to hurt Peter. The Goblin wants to hurt Peter. But now he knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, then that's it. He has to hurt him. So yeah, I think the Thanksgiving scene is an amazing scene in this film. Peter and MJ hospital talk. It's basically the backyard scene on steroids. And I think it's the scene where MJ finally falls in love with Peter. I love how Peter uses a fictional conversation with Spider-Man to just admit to this girl how much he cares about her. And it's amazing. Tobey Maguire's delivery is great. The dialogue I don't actually find cheesy. I think it's very nice and very touching. We've all said stuff to people who we have crushes on that in hindsight is cheesy, but at the time you think it's like some Shakespearean love poem. I also think Kirsten Dunst's acting is great as well, where MJ kind of realises all these nice things he's saying about her and finally sees Peter in a completely new light. And I think it's a really amazing scene. It's a touching scene, and it came at a good moment in the film as well. A more quiet moment. Aunt May is in hospital, having just been attacked by the Green Goblin. I think everyone needed to breathe before the finale, and this scene was perfect to do that. So yeah, I really like these more quiet and touching moments in this film. The bridge rescue scene. I miss the days when villains just wanted to get one up on the hero. They didn't want to conquer the world or put an entire city at its mercy. They just wanted to prove a point to the hero. And Green Goblin's point is you can't have everything. You either have to be responsible as Spider-Man or you need to be selfish like Peter Parker. And the choice he gives, whether you're going to let the woman you love die or a bunch of innocent kids who have nothing to do with it die, it's on you. And I think that this is a really intense scene. I'm still on the edge of my seat to this very day, even though I know what the outcome's going to be. There's also some great images, especially when Green Goblin first drops them, and you see in Spider-Man's Ivor Eyes, MJ and the kids. I think that's a really iconic image from this film. And also, I love that the New Yorkers rally behind Spider-Man to distract the Green Goblin. Obviously, that was a late edition. This film came out a year after 9/11, and I can only wish I was in a cinema in New York. Because from what I see from comments on YouTube, everyone says that the audience went absolutely mental at that scene, just kind of highlighting that New York can come together in times of crisis. Obviously, New York in this film is a very vibrant city. It's kind of a character in its own right. You always see Spider-Man swinging from the point of New Yorkers, and I think this scene was just kind of a combination of that, having New York finally side with Spider-Man over the Green Goblin. And of course, Spider-Man does save the day. He manages to save the kids as well as MJ. And as I said, this isn't kind of a world-conquering event. It's a small fight on a bridge, but it's not about the stakes. The stakes, of course, are incredibly high, but they're personal stakes. You know, they're not world-threatening stakes, but they're personal stakes to Spider-Man, and that's exactly what it should be. Spider-Man and Green Goblin's final battle. Now, they have some great fight scenes between them in this film. If I had to pick out another one, it would be the burning building fight. But this one is intense. I think because Raimi chose to use hardly any CGI. It's all choreography based. And it kicks ass. And I can't believe I just said something that cringy, but it does. It is brutal. I mean, Spider-Man gets his ass kicked in this film. And it is just shocking, and it is sometimes difficult to watch, especially during this scene. I mean, this just shows what an unstoppable force Green Goblin really is at this moment. And I love that the fight finally changes when Spider-Man realises that if he dies, then MJ is in trouble, and that gives him the determination to defeat Green Goblin. I love the reveal that Norman Osborn is the Green Goblin. It's not a massive reveal. He just kind of says, look, it's me. But it's all a ploy. It's all just for Norman Osborn to kind of lure Spider-Man into a false sense of security. I also think that Norman Osborn's death is handled well. It had to happen. I don't think you could have had him live. I think it had to end with his death. The death is brutal, having him impaled by his own glider in the stomach. That was done really well. And I also love that technically the Green Goblin gets the upper hand because, as he says, don't tell Harry. So now Spider-Man has that on his conscience. He has to make it look like Spider-Man was involved in his death rather than tell Harry the truth about his father. So at the end of the day, the Green Goblin got the upper hand. So a really cracking scene. Once again, it's not a world-threatening situation. It's just a hero versus a villain in a brutal fight to the death. And that's why I love it so much. And the final scene, we're at the end now, and I've chosen two scenes, I put them together, and that's the graveyard scene and the final swing. Now, the graveyard scene, there's a lot of emotion there, from Harry basically saying that he wants revenge on Spider-Man, which makes Peter realise that whatever he does, he just won't protect everyone. And then obviously we get a really touching moment between Peter and MJ where she finally admits how she feels about him. And honestly, I remember the first time I saw this and it was like, yes, you've been waiting throughout this film, because that is the backbone of this film, is a love story between Peter and MJ. And this was kind of the conclusion of that. And then, of course, the heartbreak sets in because Peter turns her down. Because Peter finally understands with great power comes great responsibility. And he doesn't want to put MJ at risk. And that is a devastating moment, but also a really great moment as well, because it finally highlights Spider-Man as a character. He has to make sacrifices. He puts his responsibilities first. And I think that's why so many people love Spider-Man as a character, because he is not selfish. And also I love the final scene with Peter Parker saying, "This is my gift, this is my curse. Who am I? I'm Spider-Man." A callback to the first line in this film where he says, "Who am I? Are you sure you want to know?" Now we know who he is. And then we get the final swing. And my God, I wish more comic book films had scenes like the final swing. It doesn't end with the actor's face. It doesn't end with the actor feeling sorry for himself. It ends with Spider-Man swinging through New York City, getting your adrenaline pumping. The way it's filmed, it feels like you're actually swinging with this character. He swings to the top of a pole with the American flag in the background and then swings towards the camera and the film ends. And that is how you end a comic book film, with the audience seeing the superhero in action one last time. Now, this Spider-Man film is amazing. It is one of my personal favourite comic book films. And I know a couple of years ago it seemed to be in to kind of hate on this film. Especially some MCU fans, they really criticised this film. But for me, this is a unique comic book film which there really isn't anything like. And that's why I love it. A film like this, it will stand the test of times. A number of the MCU films will not. But this film, even 20 years later, is still adored. And I think 20 years in the future, it will still be adored. So I hope you really enjoyed this video, guys. Obviously, if I was rambling a bit, I do apologise. I'll try and work on my commentary during this. And I will see you in another one. See ya!